Okay, now we are having that open meeting for the board to discuss and or vote on the matters that are listed in the agenda. There are a number of motions listed on the agenda. The second and third Town of Oroville's motion to change hearing location and the Town of Oroville's motion for oral argument were withdrawn by the town, so we don't need to address those. The first one listed on the agenda is Invenergy's motion for protective treatment of confidential information contained in Invenergy's responses to the Town of Oroville's 22nd data request filed on February 14th of 2017. There have been no objections to that motion for protective treatment. The material sought to be protected falls within the appropriate information for protection. So I would move that we grant the motion for protective treatment. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And that means that the outstanding motions are the ones that we just heard argument from the parties on. The Conservation Law Foundation's motion regarding additional advisory opinions filed on February 24th, 2017, and the Town of Oroville's motion seeking supplemental advisory opinions, new advisory opinions, and employment by the Board of Independent Expert Witnesses, all which were filed on February 21st. And now's our opportunity to discuss. I would like to discuss the independent expert witnesses. I don't think at this point it appears to me that it's necessary for the board to require independent expert witnesses. I think in the past, independent expert witnesses have been for a particular issue that is critical to a decision on which none of the parties are capable or available to produce any testimony. And so it becomes necessary for the board to answer the questions before it to hire an independent expert witness. I don't see that we're in that position. Whether that might change as we go forward, I certainly wouldn't want to foreclose us from doing that in the future. But at this point, I don't think it's necessary for us to do that. But I'm interested in what my fellow members have to say.
I've been thinking along the same lines. In a lot of ways, the motions and from all the parties in their discussion were simply articulating that we have the authority to do that and how it's paid for. I would not close the door on it. I think there may be value in having objective expert testimony on certain aspects, but at the moment, I agree with your statement. I don't think I'm prepared today to either close the door on that or to decide that we need it right now. We have a lot of expertise and expert witnesses that will be coming into this process.
Just want to confirm what was said by my two fellow board members. At this point, the board does not need an expert.
Right, I don't think at this point, I don't see a need for us to commit to hiring an expert witness on anything. And although I wouldn't want to foreclose us from in the future, should we feel that we need additional expert testimony, that we could find our own expert, but at this point I don't see that that's necessary.
Sure.
Madam Chair, we have a situation, particularly with the advisory opinions, where I think we're going to agree with some things in part, agree with some things entirely, and in other areas, for instance, on this expert witness, we're not foreclosing that opportunity, but I guess we're not agreeing with the specific motion made by the town and CLF. They had different areas that they wanted to see us use those, plant design, water, and supply. So do you want to discuss them all and then talk about kind of a comprehensive order that's going to incorporate these various parts?
Yes. So that would bring us to the additional advisory opinions or supplementary advisory opinions. Good.
I might recommend, and I'll look at my notes that we talked, there's advisory opinions where I think there's common agreement that we could talk about. There's some where we had a stated disagreement and some where they're sort of neutral or vague areas, and then we may have some of our own. So could you organize it that way?
That sounds brilliant.
Specifically, maybe I can just add for my sake, I'm basically looking for additional information from those agencies whose advisory opinions might be impacted because of the new water plan. Personally, I'm not looking at, because of the new revisions to the water plan, I'm not considering this to be a new project. Yes, a significant component of the existing project has changed. So specifically me, I would like to limit our advisory opinions to the agencies whose advisory opinions will change because of the new water plan.
I take issue with that because in some instances, and I can name several of them, there were other gaps. Let's say DOT. They didn't have information. Now there's truck traffic related to the water plan, but they also have a permit application in front of them. And as we move forward, we would be wrapping their decision on that permit up in our plan. It was already mentioned that DEM stated specific areas where they needed more information in order to talk about irreparable harm, and the applicant talked about providing that information. So there are areas where new information has come forward in this process or new permit applications where I think we want the department to supplement what they've already said or where they've identified a gap as well as address the water supply plan. That may not be so for all of them, but at least for some of the agencies with large jurisdiction, I think it's the case, or new permit applications pending. So perhaps we wanted to go through, starting with the major state agencies.
I think that's the way to go. I was just trying to jot down some of them.
The list which I have, which I was able to put together, was the Department of Environmental Management, Rhode Island Department of Transportation, Statewide Planning. These were the agencies there was a consensus on. There was a consensus on the town inspector, the town, can you first talk about the state agency?
Yep. Let's start with the state agencies. And if we took them one by one, for instance, and we may be able to draft an order that has some similar language, I'm hoping for all of them in regard to the water plan, but if we took them one by one, for DEM, I think it would be both supplement your advisory opinion to address gaps from the original one, respond. I know in the case of, say, statewide planning, there's already been additional data requests. There may be additional data requests from other agencies. So it would be both supplement based on any new information or information that you need to make your decision, as well as to address the water supply plan. And for DEM, there'd be a septic permit that's new. other aspects of the new design that would be new and be rolled up into that advisory opinion. I think the earlier order is somewhat general the way we phrased it, but I think we may have some language that's consistent with each of the agencies about filling the gap and responding to the new water supply plan.
I think you're absolutely correct. And I think that I can certainly agree with those state agencies where there has been no objection to asking for additional information from the state agencies. So that's DEM, DOT, and statewide planning.
Department of Health. I don't remember whether there was consensus on Department of Health or not.
I asked Invenergy a specific question about their position on the Department of Health, and it didn't, they were not joining in the request, but it didn't sound like they had a serious opposition to it. I'm not sure, as they pointed out, what additional information we might want from the Department of Health, given that their primary concerns related to the initial water plan, which is no longer in effect.
They had a rather lengthy advisory opinion with some attachments and issues around air quality, noise. As I recall, there were other aspects. So I would recommend that we say, based on the additional, the design changes and the additional information, we request that you update your advisory opinion as appropriate. The issues of irreparable environmental harm are very related to public health, and so just asking them, as was pointed out, they may say there's nothing that necessitates us to update that opinion. There was some discussion about diesel emissions and about how these are within the limits of, we heard issues on both sides of that, but wouldn't we like the public health issues related to that to be responded to from the Department of Health? And it will be easy for them to respond if they don't have much to supplement, but I would like to hear from them.
Yes, I agree with that too. I think that's appropriate. The PUC.
I just wondered, on the statewide planning, there was a lot of discussion about how detailed to be in terms of asking what elements of the guide plan, and did either of you have any comments on that? I was expecting to ask them, and I think there was no disagreement from any parties, to update their advisory opinion based on the new water plan and additional information, but I didn't know whether you wanted to get more detailed.
I think we could also ask them if they think it's necessary to address the guide plan.
Yes, definitely we would like the statewide planning to give their input on all the state guide plans. Like there are currently 18 state guide plans, so we definitely would like, there are currently 18 elements of the state guide plan. So definitely we would like the statewide planning to give the advisory opinions on all the elements of the state guide plan.
Or at least the elements that they tell us they think we're going.
Madam Chair, before you move on to the PUC, the Office of Energy Resources was another that was recommended by some, kind of neutrality expressed by the Office of Energy Resources Council here in terms of they're happy to do it, but they also feel that they are a party to this proceeding and can respond to that at the hearings. So where does your thinking lie on that issue?
I think that actually the Office of Energy Resources already addressed the issues about greenhouse gases. While they may not have addressed the report, the recent report that was alluded to, I think that they can in fact address that at the final hearing, and that otherwise they have already addressed the identified issues.
Yes, I do agree. The issues of OER could be addressed at the time of the hearing.
Yeah.
Yes, I do understand. Again, we have a greenhouse gas reduction plan, and we can ask for OER to give more information, but I do think it could be addressed at the time.
Okay, that makes sense.
For the PUC, I don't think it's necessary for us to request additional information from the PUC. I think that they've addressed the matters that have been discussed, and I don't think that we really benefit from any further work on the PUC advisory opinion. Those are also matters that we can address at the final hearing.
I disagree, and I don't know how you're going to want to handle this in terms of how we do our final order, so I will leave that to you. Only in as much I reread the opinion this week, so I understand the points that you're making, but given that it's a critical aspect of the findings that we make and that it's in their lane, I would prefer to have them say, we saw this new evidence and it doesn't affect our conclusions, or it does affect our conclusions.
You're talking about
the PUC. And
right, but you're just talking about the latest storage capacity option.
Right, I'm talking about the additional information since their hearing in July, I believe it was, that was outlined by a couple of the parties. And I realize that may mean that they have to have another hearing, but I do actually agree with what the counsel for the town said, that I think we'll be hearing those issues if they're not, and I'm certainly looking to them as per our initial order, our earlier order, excuse me, in regard to issues of need and cost. So I disagree, but we can decide. I don't know how you feel, Parag, how you want to handle it. I mean, focus.
You're the deal breaker.
Sure. Again, I do understand from where board member Coit is coming from. Since PUC is an important agency and their advisory opinions on the need and the cost is very important, and the board should definitely take those considerations into account. But I do think those issues could be addressed at the time of the hearing, and additional advisory opinions are not needed.
I'm a little familiar with how they operate at the PUC. Sorry.
But again, we can.
But you can argue more.
Let's go to the list. We can again discuss that, right?
Yes, that brings us to. Are there any other state agencies?
One state agency that came up was the Water Resources Board, but in listening to the testimony, and I'm on the Water Resources Board, so I'm very familiar with their jurisdiction and their degree of activity. I think the questions about yield and water supply would belong more squarely in front of the Providence Water Supply Board. I think that Mr. Shore made that point, than the Water Resources Board. So that was brought up, and I believe was brought up during the oral argument in one of the motions. So I would suggest that would not need an advisory opinion from the Water Resources Board, which leads me to a question for you, Chair. I'm not familiar with what you said we should take administrative notice of. So on the issue of the Providence Water Supply Board, I would like to hear from them on how this fits into their maximum sustainable yield, how this fits into the legality and structure of their operation. But you suggested earlier in the exchange that maybe we have that information already. So could you tell me more about that, because that will influence where I stand?
At the recent Providence Water Supply Board rate case, Providence Water Supply Board was asked specifically about its agreement with Johnson to supply water and whether or not there would be any problems. I don't have the testimony in front of me right now, but I can supply it to both of you. And it certainly indicated that there was no problem with that.
So that testimony basically talked about the existing and projections, right? Like, what we are concerned about, like what's the existing yield, and let's say for the next 30 years, what's the requirement? What are the projection usage requirement for the next 30, 35 years?
Certainly, unless there was something really bizarre.
Yes,
but I don't think we need to have them consider that. But I can supply that information.
I would say, I'm sure we're going to ultimately talk about timing. If you could supply that information, I would like to review it and then decide based on that, or if it's answering the questions that we have about both aspects, the yield and the appropriateness or legality. And then we could ask them for an advisory opinion if we thought we needed to once we examine that information. I believe, looking at my list of the things that were raised in these motions and the oral argument, that we've gone through all the state agencies, Providence Water Supply Board, the PUC, and now there's a number of town boards in Burrillville, as well as the other two communities that have truck traffic that were also brought forward.
LIDOT was considered, right? The advisory opinion of LIDOT.
Yeah, we discussed it. I'm not sure. So it's both issues of the water supply plan and the additional truck traffic, including, I think I would want to ask them about the issues about the traffic on state roads, which, according to the Invenergy application, the routes are entirely on state roads and the pass-through communities, as well as about their advisory opinion on the permit application.
I have a question on this. I do not know whether the applicant should answer or who should answer. We basically say the traffic will only be on the state roads, but how you can basically limit the trucks on only on the state roads?
I believe that the applicant provided that the traffic will only occur on state roads. And that and I have not seen anything that was filed by any of the other parties that would dispute that. But you can certainly ask that of DOT. When you ask them to review the water plan, and based on their water plan, they didn't originally file an advisory opinion on whether or not they will file something. In the past, they haven't. However, if you ask them to review the advisory opinion or file an advisory opinion in light of the new water plan and the traffic impacts that would occur, and whether or not all of those traffic impacts would occur to state roads and the effect of that, then they may respond to that.
Thank you.
Just for the record, they did submit a 3-page advisory opinion, but it mostly stated what they didn't have and that they would be available at the hearings. But I think now we'll send them the water plan and they have the permit application, and I think we should get a more substantive response from DOT. The town of Burrillville building inspector was an area where there was unanimity about requesting a supplemental advisory opinion. And I agree with that. There's the erosion control and some other aspects that I think they'll want to further comment on.
I'm okay with that since there was no objection.
I'm fine with that.
The town zoning and planning department, Burrillville, and the tax assessor, I believe those were all objected to by Invenergy. And I don't believe that Conservation Law Foundation did not object to any of the things that the town of Thoroughville asked for.
So where does that leave you on those questions?
I think that whatever remaining questions there might be are relatively, would be appropriate for addressing at the final hearing rather than having to request additional advisory opinions. It's something that we're going to be requiring testimony on anyway, and I'm sure we'll spend a significant amount of time on that at the final hearing. So I think that that's not something we really need to cover in supplemental opinion.
I do agree. Were there any significant gaps in the first advisory opinion which the town of Burwell planning board gave us? I mean, I do understand because if you only look at this advisory opinion only through the lens of the new water plan, yes, I do agree with the board chair that we might not need a advisory opinion, but if we are looking at were there any significant gaps in the advisory opinions initially?
And I think it's important to make clear that just because we're not including any agencies, whether municipal or state, in new advisory opinions doesn't mean that there are not involved.
Sure.
There are a lot of matters that we'll be covering at the final hearings. Right.
I guess I have mixed feelings. I mean, the point was made, the town is a very active participant in this, submitting many, many data requests to provide information. I've read those advisory opinions a couple times. They did talk about areas where they needed more information in order to reach a sound recommendation, and in some instances, and now I would have to look at them again to remember which one was which. There was a contention that some information would be coming later in the process. So for now, given where you two stand, I guess I would like to, as you put, they can provide more information to us, and we would welcome that. I'd like to review those again. We'll go with the building inspector. Where we have a very active town participant as a party to this proceeding, and I'll leave it there. But I would like to look back at those because those are areas where we have some jurisdictional responsibility and will certainly be very significant issues in the final hearings.
I think there was some consensus on town of Johnston.
There was not consensus. Each party, and I asked that question, had different spheres within Johnston that they wanted advisory opinions. I tend to think asking that community, which is so central to the water plan, for an advisory opinion is a good idea, even if we made the distinction in our order, and it was discussed today, jurisdictional, what are the entities that have license responsibilities or permit responsibilities that we're wrapping into this process, and what are non-jurisdictional, where we want to get their opinion because it's information that matters to us. And I think that's how we should think about these.
What information do you think would be that we need from Johnson? We know that they're in favor of the plan. Everyone who we would ask, because there was reference made to the town council, in favor. I'd say even though there wasn't any objection, I don't really see that as particularly helpful. If Johnston had a problem with it, they could have filed something with us, as could any of the other.
So I agree in terms of if we were to ask the town council that's already voted in approval of this, I'm not sure there's anything meaningful we would get from that. I guess the other intentions were, when I just asked this, the Invenergy talked about the DPW department, and the town and CLF talked about the tax assessor and the planning board. To your point, Madam Chair, I think we've got a town that's already approved this. So in that instance, I don't know that we'll get,
because they've already approved it, and because we're not talking about any permitting or licensing that would be involved coming from the town, it just doesn't seem to me that there's anything helpful that we could ask for an advisory opinion for Johnson to provide, or any of the agencies that were identified in Johnson.
Understand from where the Madam Chair is coming from. The only thing which we can discuss, and I'm not saying we should go ahead, it's like we can ask the Department of Public Works on how the, let me see, how can I phrase this, how the water contract, water systems might work, and that's already there, right? It has been given to us already. But again, just want to know how the Department of, because it will be done through Department of Public Works. So, something to think about.
I think the elements, the town is going to have a water filling station. And we have information about that, but some of those details remain to be determined. That is something that's going to be part of the water plan. So, in terms of the key aspects of this licensing proceeding,
How that information that we would want relates to the decisions that we're charged with making.
And I guess it would be the socioeconomic, when I think of the key aspects, there's of the licensing decisions and where we need to end up. Certainly the contention was made about asking the tax assessors, not just in Johnston, but the other two communities, about truck traffic, asking about comprehensive plans, but I'm not utterly convinced. So I guess I would throw it back to both of you about is there something we particularly want and need in those advisory opinions in order to make our decision?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so.
And if you're saying that, I assume in the towns where the truck traffic is passing through on what we believe to be state roads, you feel the same?
Yes.
Yes, for me, but yes, as we first said, we want to ask right out how the new truck traffic will impact the state roads.
Absolutely. We are asking both the Department of Health and the Department of Transportation questions relating to increased truck traffic.
Yeah, because that will, yes. Okay. Because they will be talking about the impact of traffic on the roads that might also cover. Yeah, okay. That makes sense.
I think what we're missing from that is the impact that that might have on those communities separate from the impact on the roads and the health. But that's something we could invite in later, but that is, I just want to point out that is what we're missing from that.
That's a good point. Again, because of the additional traffic, how the communities will be impacted. And that's a good question which we should address.
School buses.
Address how?
Would be at the time of the hearings. I have a question about, I don't know whether it's advisory opinion or the data request. The question about the wastewater. How does the wastewater get treated? It was trucked. I think it was trucked. It was not on site. It was trucked to our industrial facility.
Well, there's a septic system that's going to be used just for an on-site operation, and then there was the trucking of wastewater with the plans for that, as I recall, not yet determined in terms of where exactly that was going. I think the DEM advisory opinion we'll wrap up in that septic system, and I think we'll be getting more information on the wastewater disposal.
Also, no doubt, it's a very significant component of questions that we'll want to ask at the final hearing. I think that we've covered each of the different entities that were requested.
I think that you should just, there are 5 that you would like additional information from, and I think that you should go through each one of them specifically. I can summarize them for you, but I think that you need to vote on them if that's the way you choose. The first one was DEM, and my understanding was that you would like them specifically to address gaps in their original plan based on the questions that were asked in the preliminary order, and to review the water plan and comment on whether or not that has any effect on what they've already decided and presented to the board, and if it does, to also comment on that in a supplemental advisory opinion.
I would add to that any other elements of the new design that required DEM review and approval. Some of them, as pointed out, are separately being considered under the Clean Air Act or under the Clean Water Act or under the Wetlands. But I believe there may be aspects that they also need to update there. So I would add that. Do you want us to vote on each one separately?
I think that you should.
Okay. So that's really 3 elements.
Right.
The gaps, elements of the new design that have a DEM review aspect, and the water plan.
Yes.
So that would be where, considering the motions filed by Conservation Law Foundation and the Town of Burrowville, and we will be granting in part and rejecting in part.
I think so. I think so. I think that the board has the authority to ask for any advisory opinion, so I don't even think it's necessary that you either grant or deny the motions. You obviously can, however, you have the authority to ask any agency for additional information, so.
After all the work on the motions, they might want it as closure.
I could, one way we could structure it would be to, approve and deny in part, and then separately do an order that has a little more detail. That is our order requesting advisory opinion that spells out. That might be a way to structure it.
I think that if that was the motion that was made, that someone should second it and vote on it with regard to DEM.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
And then with regard to the Department of Transportation, I believe that you wanted them to consider the water plan and the original request that was made to them in the preliminary order and supplement their initial advisory opinion in light of that new information.
Right, so I would move on DOT that we ask them to address the water plan, which includes focus on the truck traffic and state roads, address the new permit application in front of them, and any other issues that where there were gaps in their initial advisory opinion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then with the Division of Planning, I believe that you wanted them to supplement their advisory opinion to address the water supply plan.
Wait, is this statewide planning?
Statewide planning, I'm sorry, statewide planning. And to address the 18 elements or the 18 guide plans that are within their plan and supplement their advisory opinion based on that.
I do make a motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then with regard to the Department of Health, I believe that you wanted them to supplement their advisory opinion with the water plan and review of the water plan and any effects that that water plan could have on public health.
Particularly addressing the increased diesel emission.
Exactly, and to supplement their advisory opinion.
I make a motion to ask the Department of Health the supplemental advisory opinion.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
And then finally, I believe that you wanted the Burrowville Building Inspector to address specifically the additional information that's been supplied to him. I believe that he was, subsequent to his advisory opinion, provided with the soil and erosion control plan. He was also provided with some types of conceptual renderings, building renderings, but I know that Invenergy has submitted some information to him that he had identified as lacking in his additional advisory opinion, and I think that he should be asked to supplement his advisory opinion to the extent he can after his review of that information.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll make a motion on the, with regard to the PUC, and I believe I know how it will play out, but I would like to move that we also request the Public Utilities Commission to supplement their advisory opinion to address new information in regard to need and the cost justification for the project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Nay. 2 opposed, 1 in favor.
And then
Oh, wow.
I think you may want to do that again.
Sorry.
Because Parag's eye was confusing, so could we just do a mulligan?
Yes.
Keep it
Okay. Mulligan. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Nay.
Nay.
And then lastly, I think that you need to vote on whether or not the board at this time is going to retain independent experts.
I would move that the board is at this time, without foreclosing its options in the future, not going to hire any experts.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
And then, last but not least, I believe that the board has the option of determining how long it will afford to these agencies to render their advisory opinions.
I think we need to address OER. We also considered,
I thought,
we also considered them, and I believe we all agreed that we would not request an additional information for their opinion.
okay, so I think you were just going to vote on the ones that you were ordering.
Sorry.
That's okay. If you want to generally vote on the ones that were listed, but I don't think it's necessary. But I do think that the board does need to specify a time period within which you want these supplemental advisory opinions.
Right, so the statute, as was stated and reviewed, says that the board shall offer, actually, I should, let me cite it, I have it right here because I'll say it wrong. I think we all know what it says, but let me just read it here. Each agency of the state or political division, this is 42-98-10, and it talks about who we would ask for an advisory opinion, and then it says each agency shall conclude its consideration and issue its advisory opinion not more than 6 months following its designation under section 4298-9 or any lesser time that the board may require, or the right to exercise the function shall be forfeited to the board.
And I think that because we're not asking nearly as comprehensive an advisory opinion as we were initially, that we're just asking relative to the initial order, that I don't think we need to go to 6 months. I think that might be excessive.
I wonder what you thought. So here's what we want. We want good information. So I think the question is, how much time do these agencies need to provide that? And I thought it was kind of an interesting, the status update. So I think your point is they don't have the huge application. They have a water plan and some new design elements, and in some cases more information, hearings that have been submitted, so that a time less than 6 months may be sufficient. Does it make any sense? And I'm just, this is our opportunity to talk, to have some kind of status update, to say a time less than 6 months, but say, give us a status update, as Mr. Short recommended, after 60 days, or whatever it is, so that we get a sense of whether any of these entities feel that, given data requests they're waiting on, or whatever it might be, that they need more time. Just a thought.
Yes, we do want to give adequate amount of time to the agencies to supply us some quality information. But yes, I do agree with board chair that maybe 6 months are not needed for that purpose. So as you said, board member Coit, maybe a status update after 60 days or 45 days. That basically says, okay, after 45 days, the agencies can provide us some information on what amount of time they need to supply to give us some adequate information. Will be useful.
I guess I was thinking more, give a concrete deadline, because I think that's important for state agencies who have got a lot on their plates, but ask for a status update so we might have a better sense of whether anyone's going to have problems meeting that, or if they can provide the information earlier.
So if we agreed that 6 months might be too much, what do you think would be appropriate? Since you know how DEM operates, and they're one of the primary agencies that were requesting this, what would you suggest as a time period?
Well, it depends on when they get information they need to make a decision. So statute and our request,
that they get the information, and that they can always ask us or indicate to us that they are not ready to provide that information.
I guess offhand, I think DEM probably has one of the bigger sets of recommendations to make. They also obviously have large permits that are going through it in other spheres, not in front of this board. So since you're putting me on the spot, I guess I would say 4 months.
Yeah, my answer would have been 3 to 4 months. So I agree with you.
Okay, 4 months. Should it be 4 months for all of the agencies, or 4 months for DEM and if there are other agencies? I'm trying to think if any of them have comparably different.
I think I would suggest that we write a letter that says we'd like to get this information, we'd like to get this quality recommendation, this advisory opinion from you as soon as possible, so that we have a process that continues to function. We would ask for a status update. Maybe it's 45 days, maybe it's 60 days if we're given 120, so that we can just get a check-in on whether we're going to get the information earlier. Generally, people's tasks expand to the time that they have to fulfill them. But I think having that, asking for it as soon as possible, having a check-in point that would give us more information as a board and as the parties to this proceeding, that would be my suggestion.
I agree with 4 months with maybe 45 days for the status update. 45 days, 120 days in all. and 45 days to 60 days for a status update.
I do think that we'll be counting on Mr. Bianco to call each state agency for that status update, because if we're sitting waiting for everyone to give us one at a date certain, I'm skeptical. So I think that would say that we would ask you as a coordinator to get in touch with the point person for each state agency and get that update and report back to us. We may have reasons that we need to meet in the meantime anyway.
I think that sounds good. What else? Have we covered everything?
Madam Chair, I just want to remind you, it's been on my mind, we had said that we weren't going to have a final hearing in the town of Burrillville until we had a water plan because it had been withdrawn. And so that is an outstanding issue that we have, is to have another hearing.
A final public hearing.
Yes, sorry, a public hearing. People had asked us, I think it's the last public hearing, that they asked us to not have another one until, and certainly a lot of issues were brought up about the Pasco, the contaminated water, and those were issues that we heard a lot about at some of the previous, and now we have a different water plan. And I don't know, I just wanted to remind you and us that we need to schedule that public hearing. I think after we send out these orders requesting additional advisory opinions from the various entities, some of the folks who would go to a public hearing might want to see those advisory opinions. So we should think through exactly when that should be, but it sounds like we would maybe in late spring, early summer, hold another public hearing in Burrillville just to hear from the public.
I think that's a really good point. Thank you for reminding us. We'll turn that over to the coordinator.
Yeah, I know in some of what we heard on various issues, some of the state agencies were working on advisory opinions on those very points that we heard information at the public hearing. So I think we just want to think through whether it'd be smarter to have the public hearing after we get the advisory opinions, so that people have a chance to look at them all, and that would put us at April, May, June. That would put us to a public hearing in the summertime between getting the advisory opinions and holding a final set of hearings.
I just have a feeling that timing would be would appeal to the people who are interested in following this. So, yes. So that means we will schedule another public hearing sometime in the summer after we have received the materials that are being requested. Is there anything further that we need to address? All right. Thank you very much. I believe we can adjourn. Motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.